Hello and welcome to the next, it's not the next episode, but it is this episode of Ask
Mom
and Dad. As we learn how to say that, it's just awkward to pause in the middle. I should just stick it at the end so it's Ask Dad and... I know we hash this we hash this every single time we started out. But today, welcome to this episode of Ask Mom and Dad. I'm Dad, and she's still Mom, and we are here today brought to you by Tang. It's not really. I don't even. Is Tang still a thing? I'm just kidding around. If Tang wants to pay us money,
orange salad that we just made and ate some. So if we don't speak clearly, it's because of the milk products or something.
That's
what Judah would say. You didn't drink lemon tea before you started speaking. Anyway.
If you hear the censor button, then you'll know that it is not actually. It's more of a. That's because I'm trying not to do that. Or is that what you're saying? If there's a censor button, it's because of booger, not because of a language censor.
Oh, I didn't say anything about the censor button, but sure.
But
honey,
we have it there, so if you need to cough, sniffle,
you love to play with buttons,
or other
and the
sorts
buttons
of
are there for you to
bodily
play
functions,
with.
I'm here for you
that's
to.
a great idea.
I just love to push your buttons.
I know.
You're so cute, and I'm just a mess. So we'll leave it alone. Hey. Last week we talked about Mother's Day, and so if you haven't heard that episode yet, you're behind, and you need to catch up. And
I was thinking when
too late
you
to
said,
do anything about it.
Yeah, when you said ask Mom and Dad, and we're like, well, we're still Mom and Dad. However, we don't really have any momming and dadding to do recently, so that's why we like talking on a podcast, because apparently we still have people we'd like to tell something.
Yeah, and at least one of our children tells us they listen. Well, no, all of our children tell us they try to listen.
Really?
Yeah, well, Josiah downloads them and takes them overseas with him.
Yeah.
So he's listening. He's probably caught up by now. Poor kid. We need to generate some military editions.
You're going to need to do some humor
ones. And I think,
ones
didn't
so it doesn't
Noah
depress
also?
him.
Our boys that are deployed,
I'm not sure about
both of our
Noah.
boys are deployed overseas right now, which is kind of interesting. Well, both of our military boys, our Navy boys are deployed overseas right now. And so they're in and out of contact with us. We've seen Noah pop up on a blip now and again in Snapchat.
Yeah,
Is it Snapchat?
Or,
Is
yeah.
he Snapchatting? Which means I guess it's safe to
Instagram,
say
actually.
he's in certain
Instagram.
places. Okay, yeah. So we know he's been in Scotland and he's been over that way, from what he's been
somewhere
allowed
over
legally to say when his top secret stuff isn't top secret. It was kind of cool though, because he got to go where you and I were in 2018.
Yeah,
when it was the weirdest thing ever.
The exact spot. In fact, went into, which is real weird because we didn't expect to go there, in the very north part of Scotland in Inverness, and got to go into the same little restaurant area and hear some live music.
That was just weird because I didn't expect it.
Yeah,
So,
he didn't know, I don't think either, or we would have told him where to go before he left. But kind of cool. And then Josiah is out on the ship and got to call me on Mother's Day.
he did.
Fun.
That's right. I'd almost forgotten that. It was kind of weird because it was like you didn't hear from hardly anyone until the end of the day.
Yeah, and then we have 2 phone calls at the same time.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is super cool that my kids thought of me at the same moment. But
I don't know, what is it? Is there something in that time of day where children naturally think of their parents? Is that a podcast topic we need to research and come back to?
I think it's just my kind of bad luck in a sense to get both phone calls at one time.
I want to talk to all my kids and they never
I had
call.
texted most of them throughout the day, so that was okay.
Let's look at it this way. Maybe God has your kids so wired, just like when you were raising them and they all needed you at the same time. Because they would always be talking at the same time.
That's
they would
really
asking
confusing.
you questions. That's when we came up with if you need to ask a question, put your hand on my shoulder and shut your face until
Instead
such
of
time
pulling
as
on
I
my
know.
skirt and pulling my clothes off, or hanging on my leg,
Or just trying to talk over
Thankfully,
everyone.
they're old enough that would be really bad. So it's a good thing they learn to hold my arm or wait their turn.
Well, what's cool?
They never learn to wait their turn.
What's cool is to watch them employ that same method with their own children.
Yeah.
Which I think is funny because for us it was a multiple kid situation more than some. I mean, it was adults. When adults were talking,
I was gonna say it was more about respect because we didn't want them talking over an adult, and they always needed. Most parents out there understand they always need you at the very same moment that you finally have an adult conversation going. Yeah. That's the only time that they actually care that you're around. But so to teach them how to at least respect there was an adult conversation going on and their needs were probably not as long as they didn't have blood running down their face or something else, their needs were probably okay to wait for a second, to tattle on someone or for a drink of water. They could wait
I'm
for a
pretty
few
sure
more
if they had
minutes.
blood running down their face, if you're so tuned out as a parent that you think that they still need to wait on you, you're not paying attention. But I think
Yes,
what's
this is
cool
probably
is
true.
seeing that our own kids employ that with their children. I think it's been kind of funny the few times we've been there talking to a kid or that, and we'll see, Hannah and Rory, for example, we see them a lot, and Roy just comes in and starts talking, and Hannah will just kind of look at her and say, and she'll put her hand on
her arm,
on whoever
yeah.
she wants to talk to, and she's got that down. Have we seen them do the other one that we did? If in order to stop talking, they had to catch their words, put their hands over their mouth. Roy's done that one. I've seen Rory do that one.
No, they don't do that on their own. That's a punishment. If you tell them to do that because they have talked over one another or they have continued to drone on, I don't know.
Well, I remember some of the funniest memories that I have from that is when our kids were when we had not the minivan but the maxi van, the big van, and I would look in the rearview mirror to seven children sitting in the back going. And if you can't see me, I have this look of like I'm seriously sitting here with my hand
That's
over my mouth
because
right
we were
now.
probably trying to hear something or listen to something on the radio, and nobody would be quiet and nobody would respect. That's usually what it was about.
Then you'd catch them leaning over.
They never did that on their own. They were not apt to put restraints upon their own mouth.
Yeah, it was not. They couldn't just. Would you say be quiet and close your mouth? They couldn't do it. They needed a visual reminder to put their hand over their mouth. It was very
That's
biblical
still
that
true.
way.
Most of my boys just can't stop.
Are you implying something to your husband?
You said that. I didn't.
I was going to say one more thing on that subject before we move on to our topics for today. I always thought it was funny too when I'd look back because we'd hear some ruffling around. We'd see them with their fingers open just a little bit, talking to one another, and still they'd be talking through their fingers.
Cheaters.
And,
And you didn't slam the
oh no,
brakes
I got
and
onto them
stop.
every time. I can remember going, are you talking?
Yeah, you're
Shake their head no
shaking
with their
your
hands
head,
over their
yeah.
mouth. I mean, if you're not watching on video, which you're not because we're not recording this on video, my head is shaking while the hand is over my mouth. And you can tell if I put my hand over my mouth. This is what it sounds like when you try to talk to someone. And the thing is you can hear that in the front of a 15-passenger van
Yeah, you can.
because this is much louder when you're trying to talk to the person next. Anyway, enough of that jazz. So this is brought to you by Creative Discipline. Figuring out ways that no one else has thought of. Well, on that subject, one more
that's
minute.
a great idea. I don't think
did we learn
there's
that or did we
anything
figure
new
that
under
out?
the sun, according to Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
So.
The hand on the arm thing and the hand over the mouth thing, were those things we figured out or did we read those
No,
somewhere?
I'm sure that's not true.
Well, I know nothing's new under the sun, but did we think
I
we
mean,
figured it out or did
Well,
someone...
there's a natural, to me, thing that goes along with if you're talking too much, something needs to stop it. There you have a hand, put it on your mouth. I mean, I don't know that that's revolutionary. And
Yeah,
the
it's not
hand on the
revolutionary, that's true.
arm thing, I don't know. Who knows? To wait their turn, to stop and put your hand. That also can get really annoying. I realized the other day. If they sit there forever, like you just started this adult conversation and they just decided they're going to have their hand on your arm forever.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, can you wait a few seconds to even put your arm there? Anyway,
That's so funny.
That happened the other
Well,
day.
in the spirit of our son who tries to take something random and transition into the actual next song on the radio when he's doing his radio broadcast,
Yeah,
let's
he's
just say,
pretty good
you know
at
what
it.
else is a big deal when kids grow up? They have to, what would look funny is kids at a graduation service trying to hold their hands over their mouths because they were talking too much during the graduation service. So, like I said,
Again, pretty sure they're not going to inflict that on punishment on themselves. Wouldn't that be smart?
well,
but no, I'm pretty sure.
Can you see the principal of the school walking up going, all right, guys, shut up. It's time for the commencement. Put your hands over your mouth until he's done.
Yeah, that doesn't happen even in normal disciplinary classrooms.
They can
I
hardly
don't think.
figure out what
Would be
gender they
smart,
are,
though.
much less whether or not they should be quiet. Anyway, so what we're going to talk about is graduating. It's graduation week. This last week where we live now was graduation. And the week, this week and next week are the last 2 weeks of actual school. So as we're coming to the end of school, I figured it'd be a good opportunity to talk about two things really: graduation. What are kids going through their mind? Because we have such a large teen audience, and for the
So we want to advise them.
and I'm speaking
as
to the
they're
teen
walking into life
out there
Yeah.
that are listening. Get more teens, and we have but parents in general. The second thing is parents in general. How do we deal with our kids once they become, or they think, they become
Right.
adults?
I think it's funny that you said, though, addressing the teens that listen to this podcast cracks me up. But interestingly, teens this day and age do listen to podcasts a lot. That's in fact what has gotten so big. Kind of funny to me because it's not always some of it's YouTube where they can see the people, but a lot of it's actually not. I've heard from several different, and I guess I'm thinking teenagers. I don't know the expand of. It might be more 20-somethings. That's the majority of the listeners, but it is funny how that is an epidemic, almost literally like you just said, kind of retro back to radio, where just listening to someone's voice, because you can do something while you're listening. You can, even probably paperwork and stuff if you had to, but definitely chores or that kind of, or take a walk or whatever, and listening to people's voice and conversation. And it's funny to me how that's kind of an epidemic these days, listening to people talk. And in reality, not necessarily experts, just entertaining voices or conversation.
We hear voices that come from other places, and we assume that if someone's taking the time to put it on the air, that it must be, or write
important
it down or put it on
something.
television, that it must be important. And that's unfortunate because I think we trained our generation trained them to do that because we were really the digital babies. We didn't have the Palm Pilots, the original, the AI automated assistant, not artificial intelligence automated assistant. Where I can still remember having to learn a new way to write the alphabet to use it. So all those digital things were fascinating to our generation, and so our kids just picked up with the children of that. So they don't know life without digital.
Yeah, but what I'm saying by that is it's almost going backwards for them to want to listen. And I know podcasts are digitally based; they're not. Like back in our day, recording something was that little flat machine where you push the two buttons and it recorded,
recorder, baby.
Yeah. But these days, recording something, which a lot of times is just audio, is still really fascinating. Because even though in a video age and in an age where it's driven by even these new AIs that you can produce your own self on video, it's kind of bizarre. But still seems as if people are
AI Drake.
Well, and like we know about our own kids. They listen a lot to audible books and things and so again, not necessarily movies and TV shows. Elijah's back to just reading books, which is cool to me. But Noah is one that we know listens to a lot of audio books and he's not really, not watching a lot of video and stuff. So I think that's fascinating because it seems as if some of these things where one technology seems like it's going to take over another one, it doesn't necessarily negate the last one. And maybe that's what you were saying this morning. Maybe we don't have to worry about this new AI thing just because it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to kick out all the other apparatus or the other possibilities. We were also talking about how video is just so at our fingertips now. Taking a picture, taking a video. Used to be that we had to work at it pretty hard. We had these little cameras with us, or we had to have the films and the whatever available. Now that's really available. So that's what I'm trying to say by it's still kind of fascinating to me that audio is as okay, even with this generation. Gotcha. They can be satisfied with it. I think that's fascinating. Anyway, that was a side note, but
it's still basically anything that comes off their phone most of the time, right?
Yeah.
So it's just and if they're doing, like you said, if you're driving, you can't watch TV or play video games and those kinds of things. So it makes sense that podcasts are an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah,
even
that's
that
what I'm saying.
I enjoy doing this. It's just fun. It's a focused conversation.
And everybody and their brother and sister literally do podcasts these days. Like everyone. Every time I talk or hear somebody on the news talk and they meet somebody, and she's got a new podcast. Oh, and they've got a new podcast and this or that. And I'm just fascinated by that. It's just.
Well, I think it says two things. Because, when we say everything, I think partly because we are doing this, so we're kind of in the podcast ethos. So we're going to meet people and it's going to come up. But you're right. Everyone it either talks about doing a podcast or is actively doing one. Because that is the way.
And looks for them. We know a couple of our kids look for them regularly. They really enjoy that. That's really something that is more entertaining to them, like I said, than TV or movies, which used to be kind of all there was, other than radio. And radio was pretty interesting and never really got uninteresting. And in fact, we've heard recently even how Rush Limbaugh kind of was a pioneer in the talk and news talk style radio. But that's gone crazy too and is everywhere available. And in fact, if you turn on just regular radio, FM or AM, you can still find quite a few talk stations that are just either news talk or sermons or that kind of thing too. So it's pretty fascinating to me that it doesn't require video, even though this is a video age.
Well, and what I was getting at about podcasts is, while a lot of people do them and it's more common to hear it around, what I think it also speaks to is the fact that people are listening to content, and there's enough listeners for everyone to listen to content. You and I we can ingest information. I mean, how many hours a day do we ingest information from various sources? And podcast is one of those sources. I'd say we pick up from a podcast at least 1 or 2 podcasts a week, maybe not every day. Of listening, yeah. And some of it's maybe, like you said, a sermon or preaching that's been turned into a podcast. And I always thought that's a great idea for a pastor. A couple of churches have done that. They'll preach a message and they'll sit down immediately after and have a conversation with someone about the deeper talk about the message. I think that's a great idea for a podcast, because people will do that.
Well, and even just all the sermons now that are available through podcasts. So someone, you would have to go to this or that church. And then it got to be where some were available through TV. But now it is almost every church has something, either a podcast that comes out after that they can listen to that sermon, or it's an online presence so that even after it's recorded, they can listen. I think that's pretty fascinating, because it allows for really no excuses for everyone to have the information they really do want, even though, it makes for a lot of possibilities of deception.
Well, but there's also
as
danger. I
well.
was going to say that brings up danger, and it's kind of that whole. It is. You mentioned the AI thing. It is the same issue with just too much talking without. As the Bible tells us, where there's much words, there's sin, and that's just almost like you don't really need the Bible to tell you that. When someone talks too much, sooner or later they say something stupid.
Yeah.
And
we're kind of familiar with that, actually.
Yeah. Again, are you implying something?
No, I'm a talker too. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a good.
How many times have we come home
interactive.
from meeting new people going, I hope we didn't say too much. Do we talk about us the whole time? What's going on? We're not that narcissistic. No. I'm not
we
narcissistic
are.
because I think about you all the time. And you're not
yeah.
narcissistic because
Yeah.
you think about me all the time. So we're about us.
Okay, moving on.
Moving on. Well, on the topic of what we're supposed to be talking about right now, we're talking about narcissism in general, called high school seniors and graduating students. Let's talk about them for a minute. What are, in general, what do you think some of the biggest challenges that are faced? Do you remember your graduation? And I know you you had a clear idea what you wanted to do, but what are the things that high school seniors and our graduating seniors are facing a lot of times? And a lot of them should have made some decisions, but I think where were you at when you graduated? What was the decisions you were facing, and what did you think was going to happen next?
Interesting, because I immediately jumped to what I think this generation's dealing with. But
Let's start with
for
you,
me,
then bring it forward.
well, one thing that we had that was completely different to me is we were graduating in the 80s, the smack middle of the 80s, actually. Kind of the highlight,
True.
really, you and I had, I think anyway. I don't know that there could have been a better decade or era to graduate, because there was really unlimited possibilities. You still saw the push for college fairly strong, probably more even than now. We backed off on that a little bit, knowing that some of the colleges steered us awry.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the goal, because if you were going to really do much of anything, someone needed to see that you were worth it and that you had enough schooling to call you able to put in the workplace. These days, it feels as if that type doesn't really apply the way it did then.
You were headed for college. You were sure you needed to go to college. Why did you know you needed to go to
mine
college?
was weird. I did not necessarily, but I knew I wanted to be a missionary. That's where I had,
Since
when I
you
was,
were how old?
Since I was 10.
Right.
I had decided God called me to missions, and I was going to go, in my mind, to a foreign field, not really specific. A lot of people knew kind of an area they were interested in or a language, and I didn't really have it that specifically. Just wanted to go in the foreign field. But
So you had
as
college
soon
in
as
mind as a way to train and prepare for that?
well, no, I think it was just that I knew that was access point. I had good church life that gave me access to the Southern Baptist missions programs. Told me about this, and most of those programs did require some bit of college, or that you got onto a college campus and then found out about the rest of the procedures. I think that was more of that. To me, though, I fell in love with this school when I visited it, because it was, this is going to sound weird, but I'm from a small town, really small town. Didn't even have a Christian bookstore at that time. when I went on campus at this Southwest Baptist in Bolivar, Missouri, I had gone there for an evangelism school, a camp type setting. That was it was just a really exciting week of evangelism school, teaching us and putting us in evangelism situations. It was a really exciting place. And so the hype of that, plus this college campus had a really great bookstore, which for me, all that was access to the music I loved. And in the town I grew up, I didn't have access on the radio or I didn't have local bookstores. So I had to go quite a ways to find even the music that I had fallen in love with, which was this new contemporary Christian era. And it was a big discipleship thing in my life, in my heart. So when I went into this bookstore and found all that, it was like hog heaven. This is where I want to be. This is closest to heaven I want to be on earth. Anyway, I had gotten a couple of kind of smaller scholarships. They were okay. They weren't going to pay for everything. And eventually didn't even realize how much my mom and dad actually had to get loans to pay for the rest. But but I was really super thankful and still grateful to this day that they went ahead and let me do that, because it was a phenomenal time in my life. And I still have encouraged my own kids because, and I want you to talk about your experience a little bit because it's completely different than mine, but that to me opened the doors. It really did open up a global idea. There are people all over the world who need Jesus. Here's how many are going to do that and reach them. Here's some people who have already gone, this and that. I got to know of some actual mission trips that went from my college. So that's the foreign taste that I got to do while I was there.
So
and
foreign
really,
developed at college. You wanted to be a missionary, but you
no,
said...
I wanted to be a foreign missionary since I was 10. No, because the people that I met, the missionaries I had met, were foreign missionaries. I had not met a NAM missionary or a home mission board missionary at that time.
That makes sense.
Not formally. I may have, but it wasn't set in my heart. These were
They just weren't that important.
Philippines and Barbados. And
Yeah.
well, I'm just saying the ones that came to the camp I grew up at, they had been on foreign soil
Right.
of different kinds. So
You're talking about
that's where I fell in love
families
with.
that are already they're still there. What's their faces?
They were, yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about the Brewsters, but
Yeah, the Brewsters are there
also the ones in Barbados. I'm losing their name, but I can usually draw up their name too. So there was a couple different families that were regular. Yeah, they were from those areas, and they would come back and share, and they would show us their wares and tell us about the experiences there. And I just so badly wanted to go where somebody wanted to know about Jesus, because the small town growing up there, you feel like pretty much everybody has heard the gospel. You feel like even on United States soil, that's true. So those things were, and I didn't feel like there was a need. I felt like there was a need in these foreign settings where I knew there was less Christianity, less obvious gospel presence. So
Right.
that's why my heart was drawn to that. But anyway, yeah, my college experience was pretty cool. But I knew I wanted to go to that school and had already worked with the recruiter to work through some of those details. So on my graduating day, yeah, I knew I would be there.
Did
in
you
the fall.
work on that during your junior year?
Started the process, yeah.
Okay.
And then, because you have to apply in the fall of the previous year and all that stuff.
Kind of have to.
Unless you go to a community college first so you can save your grades, right?
Well, that's kind of how it happened. For me, I mean, a couple things. As far as, we're both in the ministry. Obviously, we're married, and so we're going to be both in the ministry, even if just one of us was working in the ministry. That's the way it is. But
Comes with the territory.
for me, ministry wasn't I don't know that it wasn't an interest. I was always, as a person, I had a relationship with Jesus since I was 12. And I knew of and felt like I was talking to God since while I was before that. But I walked in our tradition. You walk the aisle, tell the pastor you want to be a Christian, pray with them, then come back for a meeting where the meeting table looks massive and the pastor even bigger, and he asks you if you really know what you're doing, and you convince him, and then he baptizes you. And that's kind of how that came.
Oh.
But that informed my high school experience to a degree, but not much, because I still was a teenager who was then going into high school, and for me there was no middle school, so we had what was called sub-freshmen. So we had eighth graders went straight from 7th grade to 8th grade, from elementary school to high school. And so we're wandering there amongst seniors. So you talk about the disparity. There's all this pimply little kids running around there. They're still just getting pimples and just come through, puberty, trying to figure it out and getting picked on by the senior class. That was my first year of school. So we did. It was established young that I needed to fit in, and so I just wanted to fit in. And this is more testimony than
appreciate
that. But by the time I got to be a senior in high school, I came to a crisis of belief because I'd really just spent the last 5 years trying to fit in.
Peeking into my just little my middle school, which was called junior high at that time. Because similarly, I went to 7th grade, and it was 7th, 8th, and 9th. We weren't quite with the upperclassmen yet, but it was enough to be like the worst of the worst.
Yeah, I hear you.
High school, middle school, I've always said, is the hardest time in a kid's life. So maybe God helped you know of his presence and his love for you at 12 because you needed to be saved through those years.
I was never unaware of him. There was always a presence. There was just this, a sense of his. But I'm relational, and I think that I'm very intuitive in who I am, and I think that somewhat
also
has made me open.
sensing, right? There's actually one of the personality profiles that says you're sensing.
All these smart people who went to colleges better than ours and came up with psychological degrees and created profiles and names for all this stuff. Yeah, according to the Myers-Briggs, I'm sensing, not judging.
See, I didn't have that privilege. Anyway,
You want me to say that you're judging and not sensing? Is that what you're saying?
Of course I am.
No,
I mean, it's just who I am.
conscientious is a much better description of you.
so
You're
sad.
concerned about what other people, you're concerned
Yeah,
about not the
way too
feelings
much.
of, but you are concerned about the considerations of other people. And I
Oh,
think
thanks.
there's a
That's
difference
nice way
in
to
that.
spin it, but yeah. I just would have loved to have had the gift of sensing. You and my mother, I think you're both in that same pod.
So
Anyway, keep going.
back to the thing we were talking about. I didn't think college was going to be where I was going. Because my grades weren't good
You really
enough.
didn't.
I was so busy trying to figure out how to fit in with everyone. I was playing hard on the weekends. I can't recall doing homework. My parents forced me to do it, I know, and I have a desk that we just got rid
did
of right
homework.
before we moved here. That was my desk throughout my childhood and adult.
I remember doing homework.
I'm trying to remember doing homework. I can remember doing homework.
I'm sure you didn't.
Do you
want to?
do you want to know?
You could just
there-
slide by the.
Okay, here's the thing. You
skin
want to
of
know
your
how much
chin, chin,
I
chin.
am a geek? My memory of doing homework starts with typewriters. When I had to learn how to type, and I had a memory ribbon brother
Oh, I remember
typewriter
that too.
in the art department
brother,
at
yeah.
Mercer University. That's my second college, okay? At Mercer University. And
year of college. Oh,
and I would go in that art department and sit there and finger peck it out until I can all the keys, but I still have this
Yeah.
sense I need to look down now and again because I'm afraid I'm going to miss.
Have you seen
all
the
these years
way
later.
they type these days? At least my children.
They type with one finger, but fast.
Yes, Elijah is lightning speed. He would probably 100 words a minute, and with one or two fingers, cracks me up.
Yeah, that's the
he's
cell
fast
phone
at
thing. And then
everything
you
anyway.
never thought thumbs would take
Yeah,
off.
I know,
but
right?
this gets.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I mean, my thumbs get tied up. Anyway, so the brother typewriter and then the IBM computer that came out with a green screen. A friend of mine, Chris Carrier, had one, and the idea of being able to write everything out and then move stuff around.
Cool.
Technically, I've been a computer junkie since they grew.
I know.
But not truly. My brother, Tom Sawyer, was coding in the basement on an Atari
not
60.
floating,
Not an
as
Atari.
opposed to floating down
What
the
was the original
Mississippi.
one?
He
It was
was coding in the basement.
He was on chat boards and stuff and having internet stuff and get off the computer because you'd be yelling that over the telephone line so you could call your girlfriend because some of us had a life. But he was down there
my gosh,
chat boarding with
that's so
people and
funny.
stuff. Chat boarding is not surfboarding or skateboarding. It's a different thing entirely that happens
It's
in a
not
dark corner.
rafting.
It's not rafting. He was
heard
Tom
me
Sawyer,
right.
but he didn't have to tie anything together with and float down the Mississippi. That's for sure to help get his friend to safety. So
Might have
anyway,
been good for him.
yeah,
but
I'm trying to remember the
Whitewashing
plot of.
definitely would have been good for
I can remember
him.
the plot of Huck Finn, but not Tom Sawyer. Now we're off.
Whitewashing the fence would have been good. But anyway, yeah, back to computers and.
Well, in my
whoa,
life
driving
at
you
that
crazy.
time, there was a lot of whitewashing going on. I was the one that did a lot of whitewashing. My brother was the one that told a lot on me.
Oh.
But then, of course, I spent my high school years trying to fit in and just be kind of the fun guy. And I'm still, personality-wise, I'm that way. But then I had this crisis called, oh, what do I do when I graduate?
My life. What am I going to do with
What
the
am I
rest of
going
my
to do with
life?
my life? And then I looked at my grades and I said, oh no, what am I going to do with my life? What saved me was one thing. I could sing. I was a talented singer. And
Okay.
I had my
Do say so
I came from a
yourself.
family of musicians just like you did.
All
And
right.
all these years later, your family still has the recordings. Skipped a generation and my daughter's got some recordings out there. Anyway, and we use hers for opening. So I guess to some degree that passed along. But
So you had some vocal
I could sing,
scholarships,
but again, going to
right?
my studiousness thing, I could sing because that was the least amount of work. It was natural for me. And so I auditioned, but because of my grades, I couldn't get into a really good school, but I could get into a free ride to go to a little tiny college up north. And my parents and my counselor in high school told me that if you go up there and get your grades up, you can transfer to a better school, which I did. The first year I went up there and got my grades up. Not that I wasn't playing as hard as I was the year before that.
And not necessarily having to study still. And yeah.
Yeah, I was going to college in the home of the Cabbage Patch Doll. Anybody, if you
really?
know what a Cabbage Patch Doll is, you are really too old for this particular episode. Because if we're talking to high school seniors, you should be going, "What's a Cabbage Patch Doll?" Anyway,
The ones with the little scrunched faces.
it was just stupid. They had a hospital
Fat
set up for these little dolls that they built there. You would have went into Cabbage Patch General and picked up your
They were supposed
hot.
to look real. They were supposed to look
child.
real. They were just.
They didn't look real. They looked like a sock that had been
Squishy.
punched in the nose.
That's a good description.
They really did.
Yeah, I like it.
Anyway, so I went to school there, and then after the first year, I moved to Mercer University, which is where eventually I graduated.
So the question was, when you were graduating, like on graduation day, is that kind of what you were asking? What was going through your mind? Or
High
what were
school.
you
Well,
thinking?
when we were coming out of high school, I was just on my graduation day. I had two things going through my mind. Am I going to go to college? Because if I failed that class, I'm a done man. Up to the day of graduation, I had a class hanging out.
That
but
you
I'd
weren't
already,
sure?
There's
Oh my
some,
gosh,
there's
that's
some,
funny.
well, there's something about me taking something 4 times and passing it on the 5th time because I did that in high school and grad school.
yes.
I mean, and not grad school. Grad school, I'd finally settled down and become a human being and figured things out. But my college years, because I didn't take high school algebra, I graduated on a business math, which basically means I could use an adding machine. And
do a checkbook.
I could balance a checkbook,
Yeah, there you
which
go.
I
That's pretty fascinating.
confessed
actually.
to you on the proposal that I couldn't
Kids
really
these
balance a
days,
checkbook.
Yeah.
So
Kids these days can't do that either. So it doesn't matter.
yeah, well, that's what is a checkbook to
Right,
kids
exactly.
these days. And who needs to balance it? It's automatic, right?
Exactly.
So anyway, I graduated. The way that final test, and you knew it was a class full of panicked graduating seniors, hoping to graduate seniors, because when the teacher came into the class, he had the test in his hands and he threw them out across the desk, and they went across the desk and onto the floor, and we scrambled like rats on a pizza to get to
find
those
your-
things and to
find your
pull them
grade.
out. And I
That's
found
funny.
mine. And I needed a D plus to pass the class, and I got a C plus on the
Wow.
test.
You
It was-
passed with
now,
flying
let me tell you,
colors.
it was 8th grade science.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That's hilarious. But it was the sciences changed.
Physical
so
science is a little harder than general
it was
science.
physical
I think
science,
you
yeah,
do that
because
in
I
7th
passed
grade.
biology and I passed, but I didn't do chemistry and I didn't anything that required the math.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't do those.
So you're saying your senior year, you were trying to pass 8th grade science?
I'm glad you finally understood that.
Oh, honey.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, here's where I'm going to
That's why-
insert. I waited on pins and needles. That's not true at all. To find out who in my class had gotten, valedictorian and salutatorian. I knew I wasn't that high up. Wasn't far though. I was 5th in my class. Hello. There was only 100 of us, but anyway.
I was 5th in my class
But
too.
at least I didn't have trouble making sure that I could graduate. However, I will tell you the cheater of that also is that I did a lot of math. A lot of music as well. I had
Yeah,
band
but
classes
you were smart.
well, mostly just band classes. I didn't have
And when
choir
I say
or
you
anything
were
like
smart,
that.
you're
though, so-
smart. I was 5th in mine too. Out of class
I wasn't.
240, I was 5th to the bottom.
I would challenge
And so
that.
that was a joke.
That's
Come on,
funny.
help me out there.
You're super funny.
Can't
I will
find
challenge
laughter
that.
out
I
there.
didn't feel smart at all. In fact, I still don't think I'm smart. I really did know how to follow rules. I knew how to follow instructions, and that was important to me. So I did what my teachers told me. Most of the time, that was pretty good. But I will tell you that I worked dang hard sometimes to try to even just get a B. Thankfully, thank the Lord, really, I would get better than I thought sometimes. And other times it was over my head and I was just flying by the seat of my pants. But that was true for my first couple of years in college as well. But I did do pretty good, and I'm so thankful because that.
Well, the first thing that
was
happened
hard.
when I went to college was I had to, first off, Truett McConnell, the little college that I went to in North Georgia, didn't require this right away. I went really on scholarship. The first year of college was wonderful for me. I got to shine in my skill set. I mean, I did an opera or an operetta, and I remember singing that.
And you were
I had
in
to
a
learn
jazz
all these
ensemble
songs.
too, weren't you?
And I was in jazz ensemble was There wasn't a jazz. It was a little because the school only had like 500,000 students. It wasn't big at all. No, it was probably bigger.
500 or 1,000? Because you
I
sound
don't
like
remember.
you said 500,000.
I know that there was a
No,
girls'
it's not
dorm
true.
and a boys' dorm, a Baptist student union, classrooms. The best part of the whole school was the food hall because it was at the top of the hill
Probably
looking
about
over the Georgia mountains.
1,500, like the one our son's at.
Maybe is that how big his school is?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it wasn't much bigger than that, or it was probably smaller than that. And so anyway, they didn't require any of those things that I didn't quite have up to snuff for college there. That happened at Mercer. I had fun getting my grades up at a school that didn't require much. Can't remember any of the classes I took there, except for my music classes.
True at McConnell College.
True at
you said,
McConnell
right?
College, yeah.
In what? Helen, Georgia?
It's
No,
in
south of Helen.
Cleveland, Georgia. Helen is Cleveland's
German
a dry
capital,
town, and no, the reason I say that is because Helen's in Cleveland County.
Oh, is it? Okay.
But it's a city in Cleveland, and it's the only place that's not. So it's just kind of a
Because it's a German, like
it was a German
Oktoberfest
town,
place, right?
Oktoberfest. So it was this one town with an exception and a dry town, and it was just interesting.
Funny. Yeah.
To be that. But anyway, then I went to Mercer, which was in Macon, Georgia. There's a Mercer University in Atlanta. And this is before Mercer was like a ranked college football, and it only had intramural sports. And I went there, and it was a good-sized school, but then I faced the first of many challenges, which was repeating over and over again. College's version of what I would consider the sciences, it was just basic algebra. And I just couldn't figure it out. For the life of me, I just could not make sense of algebra. Since the invention of Microsoft Excel, I started, because there's visualness to it, I started to understand formulas, but I could not understand that until
There wasn't
I got out of
any
college and started
practical application at some time. Isn't it true, though, that, so the difference, I think, between you and I at this point, too, wasn't it pretty important to your parents that you go to college? Like, it was kind of expected, as well as if you wouldn't have. And already I know when you and I met, they were sort of freaked out that you weren't going to finish, that it wasn't going to be, so you weren't going to, because they were even a little bit class conscious, weren't they? And some different, it felt like that when I met you, that their expectations were a little more like an upper echelon of society kind of thing, that they wanted you to have a good, because I even think I'm surprised actually that you were able or allowed to, because you started out as a music major, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Because otherwise, I'm confused or kind of surprised that your mom let you.
When
do
I go
that.
through all of the things that I didn't complete in school, I start to wonder if I ever got over being was it lazy or good decisions? And unfortunately, at this point in my life, I have to look back and go, I think I was just afraid.
Well,
if I
again,
say afraid, it's
music-
easier than lazy. Lazy is just condemning, but I was afraid I couldn't do it, I think.
What I'm trying to say is a music major, this is why I'm surprised that your mom let you. That's pretty specific, and you have to choose, at least from my understanding of the school I went to, you have to choose performance or teacher.
I was a performance major.
And well, okay, so, and what does that do? It's kind of like where we find Judah right now, and I feel bad for him kind of, because if you don't perform, if you don't have what it takes to make it, whatever that looks like, I mean, if you're choosing opera, whoa, you got to go to New York, you got to do whatever, find an opera, I don't know. If you're choosing some sort of, like if you had an instrument, then you have to make it into, say, an orchestra, or if it's a piano, I don't know, get jobs accompanying. What do you do with a vocal performance major? Where do you go from there? Because what I'm trying to say is, as a man, to me, it would seem like your parents would want to encourage you to find something that could make money and support a family, because normally that's where your thoughts of the future are going.
The words, and I quote, are something to fall back on.
Well,
which was the statement
later.
of when
well,
you
that's
fail.
What I'm saying. Okay, but
that's
so
how
did
I understood it at the time.
Did they challenge you with that before you chose music? Or because that's
No,
what I thought you were told with the ministry.
My mother was a performance major at University of Georgia. She went for a piano degree.
And so where did she make money with piano?
She got married.
Thank you.
She didn't make money.
Isn't that
with
what
piano.
I was just
yeah.
saying?
So but generally a performance major, there are a plenty of things that a performance major can do, because there are professional
Vocal
performing
performance?
groups around the world that aren't always Hollywood A-listers or pop chart top. things.
I'm serious that I don't know.
I was
what
looking.
you would do with
I was,
a vocal performance major.
You and your parents live in Branson, and we currently reside near Nashville. There's plenty of working musicians who are just not top of the tier.
Well,
People who
and
make
that's
enough
actually
to get
what I'm
by.
saying. If you had maybe a sites for writing and producing or even making albums,
Yeah,
then
the,
yes.
the truth of the matter is when you're going out of
But at that point, you were just doing kind of cover tunes in whatever group you happen to be in or whatever
well,
you
at
were
that point, I was
assigned by your
performing
vocal,
whatever
right?
my vocal teachers were telling me to perform. And I was
Yeah,
in a
that's what
jazz
I'm saying.
ensemble. You mentioned that. I auditioned for a jazz ensemble, and I was experiencing a lot of the same things that our son Judah is experiencing right now. People were speaking very highly of my potential and my skills. And Judah doesn't sound like I did, but he's the difference between Judah's path and mine is Judah started as an acting. His first passion was acting. He didn't think singing was something, and he's discovered singing since he's been in
Yeah,
college.
okay. I'm still saying,
Still performance. It's still performance related, though.
well, and what I'm trying to get at is eventually when you and I married and you had changed to ministry because God had kind of corrected your path there when you went to that one retreat. I know that's part of your
And that's
testimony.
all before I went to college.
Oh, it was? Okay, well, what I know of is that you eventually changed your major. And what I thought that you had told me was because God had really said that was more going to be your focus. So music could be a part of it. And then that's when I heard your mom say, so what are you going to fall back on? As if she believed that the ministry was going to be less likely to bring an income as music. And it just that kind of astonishes me because I always thought
I'm
you'd
trying to
almost
think
have to
about
be a
that.
teacher in order to actually make money at a music with a music performance or vocal degree.
Well, I started at Mercer with a music degree emphasis with a minor in Christianity, which tells you where my ministry thinking was. I figured, well, I can sing. I didn't figure I could theologically, lead people because I wasn't an academic. I clearly have outlined to you that academics were not my priorities along the way, at least not in math and science. But they were just difficult for me. Not so much as I've gotten older, but they were at that point in time. And I think that had more to do with focus than anything else. And when I look back even at my college career, some of the obstacles I faced had more to do with my unwillingness to train myself to focus and use the excuse of my ADHD. I look back on that now and think, was that just me not being, was that, because in today's culture where everyone's given permission to make an excuse for not performing all the time,
Right.
I now look back and go, is that just the natural working out of what we were starting to do in our generation? We just now, oh, it's okay, honey. You can't do that because you're just not able to do that. And you're okay and I'm okay. And
So we were listening, speaking of Judah, we were listening to him on the radio this morning, and he made a comment. He said he was talking to his boss, he works at the radio station at College of the Ozarks.
like us
So
with a
we got to
microphone in his
listen
face.
to him, which I really think he's good at that. And he was talking about how he was talking to his brothers, and obviously the brothers that are accessible right now would be Noah and Elijah because they play videos a lot of times online together. So he said they were making comments about how content they feel right now, especially Noah. He's married now. He's got a kind of a settled spot in the military that he really feels like is using his gifts more than he even knew he had. So this is kind of a discovery for him, and I think that's exciting, and it shows it to be for him a little more of a career than maybe just I'm going to join the military and get past this. Because originally he thought he'd go on to school and he'd love to have been a deaf interpreter because he loves sign language, American Sign Language. He's really good at it actually too. But anyway, he was telling Judah, I'm really content. I feel like these are good things. God's got me here, and I'm learning as well as I'm content with the things I have right now. Mention he's got the car he likes, that kind of thing.
Everything he
All
needs in
of a sudden,
life, a
right?
cool car, a hot wife. I mean, and
Anyway,
it's just
then there's
marvelous. It's the best
Elijah.
ever. It's the worst Donald Trump.
Elijah was
impersonation ever.
also feeling the same way, even though his is kind of more. He's got his dog and
A
he's
free
kind
bag
of
of coffee every
settled.
week.
Yeah, he's. I was telling Mom this though, and I thought, I was thinking about it. He's got a place where they kind of really rely on him. He's very faithful with this job. I wouldn't have thought he would have shined at a customer service type job, but he does. And I think he kind of comes out of himself when he's in that environment, whereas most time he just kind of hides in the back corner with games and stuff. But he's a good friend. He's always kind of been that way and tolerant of people. So I think that's why he's good at that. But what I was thinking was he's got enough ambition for this moment. He knows people rely on him in that job. And it gives him a sense of worth and purpose right now. It doesn't need much more than that. So he was saying the same thing to Judah. I'm pretty content. I've got a car that gets me around. His is not that big and fancy or anything, but it gets him around. And he's got a dog for companionship, and he's got a decent life right now. So he was telling Judah that. And Judah was saying, why am I so not content? So he was having a conversation with his boss, and he said that his boss just told him, well, some people are different, wired a little bit different. And I would add in, and at different eras, different places in life. I remember kind of being in school feeling like, seasons. Feeling like, and you may have can relate to this, feeling like you're in school, that's not the end all. When you're in school, you know you're preparing for something. So you kind of always feel like you're watching for what the next thing's going to be, because that's not the end. It's not where you can stay, especially if you're really literally living on campus and you've got the job and everything you've got is really tied into schooling. It doesn't separate out very well in your mind. So God gives you a drive of this isn't the end, and push forward, because, so you don't have that sort of settled, I'm content. Even if from day to day, I think Judah kind of lives a contented attitude. I don't think he's not really a complainer, and he does the best he can. He gets stressed sometimes like everybody does in school. But I was thinking how interesting that is because of this generation and how much less hopeful they really are. How they're, through this whole COVID thing and some of the stories you hear about the suicide rates and the gender stuff and the, everything like that, sounds as if this particular generation's really struggling to find any kind of hope about the future. And so contentment is good, except you don't want to stop. You don't want that to be your end all either, almost in any situation. Now, I also say the Bible says be careful of selfish ambition, which would push you forward for selfish means or gains, or push you on, or over someone else. But there's a certain amount of hope and courage that you hope this generation can find, that I feel like everything from, and we were back to talking about our graduation, it was a hopeful place. You live in the United States was hopeful.
Yeah, we didn't think the world was going to end due to abusive climate or anything
exactly.
like that.
And we had a president who encouraged hopefulness. President Reagan was really good to sound positive and give people...
He was funny.
Yeah, he was funny. But he also had a hopeful spirit himself. And I believe it was because he also had a faith in God that really did drive his trust and his ability to see new things, to see hope, to see, I was thinking another piece of this graduating thing is that my two nieces, Zella and Kaylee, are going to both get, which, wasn't available to you or I probably in our graduating years.
Oh, no.
But anyway, because they have older parents, they get to go to Europe for graduation. So they're going with their two moms to Europe.
That's two separate moms with separate children.
Yes,
they're
that's
two
what
moms. I know, they're two moms.
Oh, you're
Makes
funny.
it sound like,
I said two nieces. Anyway, you're right.
That's
Good
still
point.
two nieces
My
can be with two
sisters.
moms.
They're going
Your
with my sisters.
That's better, way better.
But I thought it was fascinating that the one thing, I was talking to my sister Rhonda yesterday, and she said the one thing that she had heard from them, just one of them, wanted to go visit a concentration camp. And I was really, really excited to hear that. And I think it's because I've heard so much of this generation of accepting conspiracy theories that none of those things really happened, or they talk like they can kind of revisit history and reframe it for what really was true, or, this or that kind of untruth that seems to kind of hover over this new generation, the climate that's in the air, the atmosphere right now. So I was really excited about that. I thought, thank you, Lord, for giving her a sense of, I really want to touch something that was real and yet devastating and yet actually did change a whole line of thinking of a huge generational pivot, to realize we were behind the scenes here. There were things going on that we weren't seeing or ignoring. And all of a sudden, because of that, 6 million Jews were killed. It's just
So you're saying that they're kind of picking that up on their own, or that they're wanting to explore that?
I'm saying
deeper
all over the
because
internet, you see oh, that was not real, or
Okay,
the
okay. So they're wanting to
debunking of
walk
all
out
these
and-
different
and
things.
see it for
You
them-
know
see
what I
for
mean?
themselves,
Even
yeah.
our own son-in-law doesn't believe that the walking on the moon happened. Well, that's fine. Spread all you want about what did or did not actually happen because they can, falsify all this stuff.
I'm hopeful that's
I
changed,
thought it was
yeah.
kind of cool to know that one of the next generation of Elijah's gang, the graduating seniors, wanted to know that it was real, that this was truth, and because of that, be able to stand up for what might be truth in the future in the middle of deception. We were also talking about the AIs and how it's going to lead people down a road of what is true and what is not, and it's already out there so strongly. We don't know who to trust. We don't know what news sources to believe or who's telling us what truth, even what's going on in the actual White House or with the actual government people. What can we believe? And I'm hoping that this generation are open up their eyes and ready to hear what the truth is. And what we believe the source of truth is a person. So we believe seeking him will flesh out what real truth is. But I'm glad to know they want to know even just about historical facts,
Yeah, I am too. And I think as kids are getting, the point of this episode has been we were going to try and talk about, challenges ahead facing them. And it sounds like that, some of the, we wound up having a good time reminiscing about where we've come from and the decisions that we've had to make versus the ones that the kids are making today.
I don't think they're making decisions similar to us. I think we were thinking careers. We were thinking.
Well, we were thinking careers, but you said one thing too
forward.
was that we also had expectations from our families. You'd asked me about my parents and their expectations that I should go to college and that I should have a career and that career should be lucrative. I think that still exists in a lot of American households today.
Sure it does.
As far as parental expectations, I think there's been a shift away from the necessity of college for a couple of reasons. Some of us would like to think it's political. In other words, that the colleges have gotten too creepy. While that may be true, it's really more cost prohibitive now for kids to go to school. Literally, they have to take out a mortgage on a house
Yep.
to
I was
send
going
their
to
kids to
comment.
college.
Back then, we thought that would lead to whatever we went to school for would be our career. That's why I was getting at with music. Where were you going to take that? Most of us thought along that lines. Today you hear, well, I went to college for this, but I couldn't
Went
get a
to
job in
school
that.
to train for the work that we were going to do. And I
Yeah.
did. When I
what we
was there,
thought.
my intention was to go to college, to train to be, I knew I was going to be a minister because that's what I heard God call me to be when I was graduating high school. It was literally, am I going to go to college? I had an encounter with God that said, yeah, you're going to go to college and you're going to do this or you're going to do this. And then my natural outflow of that was then I need to go to college. So I can't really lay on God that I was going to go to college. I can just say that that's what I thought I needed to do. So I trained my voice.
Again,
I took
like
Christian
I said,
studies and
right,
I
we
began a
thought
process.
to train for the thing that we thought either God had put on our hearts or that we wanted to, quote, be when we grow up kind of thing. We thought you go to college and train for these things.
Right. And now
think
people go to college to have a
today-
podcast.
Yeah. Well, and it seems as if now almost any job, I've looked myself to try to get a job, needs a BA degree. It doesn't even say BA in business, BA in this, doesn't say. Just you need to have gone to college.
Well, yeah, and there's more, especially in liberal arts colleges, there's less of an emphasis on a functional career path and more of an emphasis on a liberal arts college by definition is to give you a broader, a broader world perspective while giving you a skill. It seems nowadays it's giving you a broader skill perspective with maybe
No, a broader, too broad of a world perspective.
such a world perspective you forget what a skill is.
And you forget what a perspective is.
Yeah.
Never mind.
You go
But-
to school to be an influencer.
But because of that, truly, there were people that I remember going to school with that also had particular skills they thought they might use. Farming, welding,
agriculture,
things like that.
degrees, yeah, absolutely.
There's
And you still
very
can go to
few of
colleges and get those.
these days. Well, in fact, now we've come back down to where more people are being encouraged to that kind of actual schooling because we're
Yes.
realizing we have lost a lot
Apprenticeships
of
have come
those
back.
skills.
New schools are being created for the purpose of reinventing education because the institutions, as any institution is eventually bound to do, have gone so far off of the beaten path that they've lost their way. And anything left unchecked will do that. And so, so graduating senior, if you're looking at college and you're looking at anything that's been around for more than 100 years, I would encourage you to consider looking again.
Right.
Unless you actually got into Harvard, then I'm like, well, either you're already broken or you're going to be when you come out. So I would, or any of the Ivy League schools, because they are completely run by people who don't want you to think for yourself. They just want you to think like they do. And that's another thing about college. College is supposed to be a place where you expand your ability to think critically. And unfortunately, we are teaching young people these days not to think critically, but to think in a particular way. And I think that's questionable too. Because even Christian indoctrination, we do want people to think through the lens of a worldview that there is a judge that will judge us. That is what Christianity is at its core. God created man, and we all stand before him to face judgment for how we handle the resources on earth that he's given us. Yes, global scientist people, that includes you. But so that's what we believe at the core of who we are, which, by the way, a Christian should be naturally concerned about the environment. Maybe not with what some of the environmental science is saying today, but in general, we should not be litter bugs and crazy people.
Yeah, the point, we've had this
By the way, litter bug is an
before.
80s term. Go ahead.
That's funny. Not that we can control any of it. That's the whole point.
Right. No, we can't control that at all.
That brought to mind to me, Ecclesiastes 12 says, my son, beware of anything beyond these. And he had just talked about the words of the wise are like nails firmly fixed and are collected sayings are given by one shepherd. My son, beware of anything beyond these. I think this is the best homeschool scripture I think I've ever heard. Of making many books, there's no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. The end of the matter all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. Just like
Why are you fearing God? Why are you fearing God? Because you're going to stand before him and give account for your life.
Well, and in this scripture, really, there's nothing else that's even going to bring any kind of true difference, true knowledge. I mean, I believe the Bible says that anyway, but this passage, backing up a little bit, it says, besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs with great care. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. We have lots of that out there. But he says the words of the wise, though, are like goads and like nails firmly fixed. So they are important. The wise words are important. But to know that they're given by one shepherd, the wisdom that actually comes from our elders, from people who we know we can trust to give us those wise words. But he says, beware of anything beyond that.
Yeah.
Because many books, we were talking about this the other day, of making many books, there's no end. Oh my goodness. If there's not 5,000 new books every day. And lots of great ones out there, but much study is weariness of the flesh. So in other words, it's just a bunch of flesh information that might not.
Flesh formation.
Yeah. That might not bring any true information. But also the other thought I had was, we've always wanted, though, to make sure that our kids understood that no matter where they go, what they're doing, what they choose to do after school, it's all about finding what, in the sense, what God has for them, and like Noah and Elijah have expressed, kind of, where he's going to let them find contentment, yet not stop there, but be used of his glory, for his glory. And I believe some of our other kids, we talked about trying to kind of go through a little bit. Each one of them have done such different things. And Josiah might be the best evidence of one who really, he's in the military. He wanted to go to the military because it sounded kind of a way to get a job without having to have too much. He didn't really want to go to college much. And
well, I'd almost consider military.
So he's in a job, but it's not not necessarily that
military is
fulfilling
a
to
job,
him. His family is fulfilling.
Right. I was going to say military is a job, but it's also college. Because it's a specific, there's a lot of specific job training. It's more like a trade school.
Right.
But it doesn't, but part of the reasons that Josiah went to college so he could get the resources so he could finish college eventually, I think. But he's been in for 12 years almost now. Josiah? So Josiah. He's
decided that he might as well just retire from that because that way he's got, unless the government changes it too much, which they probably will, but anyway.
If we still exist as a country in 10 years.
But it'll hopefully provide a pension, which will also allow him to be either a little more at home and possibly have a job that doesn't have to, too much stressful income. But yeah, but what I was saying by that is he's an example of it's a job for him, but his true joy is in his family. That's what I'm praying the rest of our kids discover. I think some of them are discovering that, some through church experiences and realizing they're servants of God and his church, and that is actually fulfilling enough that really you don't need much more than that, and you need to survive. Hannah and Bradley are doing really great. Brad just has a skill labor job, but he's really good.
He's excelling at it.
At what he does, yeah, and he's been faithful to it.
He's
and
a
then
hard
there's
worker.
Micaiah, who we thought might go and actually do some of this vocal, professional stuff. But she's so content being a mom and knowing that that's where contentment is. These other things are opportunities and possibilities, but they're not necessarily where true contentment lies. And that's what I guess I pray for Judah too, because I know that he's not really going to get there until he's settled, kind of probably has a family. Of course, he loves the idea of a family, and he's always wanted to do that. But he wants to find a genuine career that he can support them. So whether it comes back to...
Well, it's
profession he's
interesting
in or
because
not.
really just the way you sum that up, and we're coming to the end of a good length of time on this podcast, so I want to wrap this one up. We can pick up with some more stuff about expectations of parents in adulthood next time. But I think that what you just said was we have kids, we'll say kids across the spectrum. I'm not talking about the autistic spectrum, but we have kids across the spectrum of
Yeah, possibly.
depending
Anyway,
on
go ahead.
on never mind. Sometimes I think I'm across the spectrum. We have kids that have gone to college now. We have kids that have went straight into the workforce and are still trying to figure out college. We've got kids who had aspirations to do a thing and then didn't do that thing, did something different and found things there. And we have kids that are doing it. Hannah always wanted to be a mom. She's doing exactly what she wanted to be and do, I think. And then we've had kids who've had tragic starts into adulthood and who have come out. And so...
And yet have settled into blooming where they're planted.
Yeah. And so, well, what I would say is at this date, as of today, as of this recording, as of this author's writing, we have the ability to assure whatever college student or, high school graduating senior might be sitting out there, that no matter what happens, you can be content and have a happy life, whether you have exactly what you thought you were setting out to do or something different. Because if you and I explored even our journey, we had and the thing about being young and coming out of high school is oftentimes your dreams are great and big, and some people rise to those, but most people find somewhere, they shoot for the moon and they end up orbiting Earth. They don't quite get all the way to the moon.
Well, and I have always believed that when Psalm 37 says, when you delight yourself in the Lord, God will give you the desires of your heart. Eventually, when you start out, you don't even know what those desires are.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know.
Eventually you look back and you can see the desires you may have had or not had. This is what he's doing, and it's a beautiful thing. I was going to read from 1 Peter 2 because I think there's a couple spots here that are just really great advice for anyone starting anywhere off of their finished, whatever, school age time under their parents' watch. Anyway, 1 Peter 5:6 says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting your anxieties on him because he cares for you. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. Resist him and stand firm in your faith." The rest of that says, because you're gonna go through some suffering, you're gonna experience some things, but God will be with you. And then also that in your hearts honor Christ as Lord, as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you a reason for the hope that's in you, and do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you're slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. For it's better to suffer for doing good than if it should be God's will than for doing evil. So if you can set up those things as goals, you can fit that into just about any career and any calling and any facet of life.
I think that's a great way to end this today, is to there's not a whole lot more to say. So thank you so much for listening to Ask Mom and Dad. We look forward to getting together with you again here in the near future. Until next time.